Hey everybody, welcome back to the Live Life Simple Kitchen. I hope everyone had a great holiday season, but with the holidays bring lots and lots of leftovers, and it has been way too long since I've done a recipe video. So today we're going to use our holiday ham leftovers, particularly the ham bone, which is something you normally just throw away. And this recipe is actually a firehouse favorite. This is my dad's firehouse recipe, and it's very simple, it's very quick to make, and it makes big portions. All great things for the freeze dryer. All you're going to need for this recipe is your leftover ham bone, a little bit of garlic, about 2 cloves of garlic. I'm using my freeze-dried minced garlic, an onion, and a couple pounds of lima beans. Make sure you get the large lima beans. I've made it without the large lima beans, and for some reason it just doesn't turn out exactly the same. So go for the large lima beans. And then we just need a big pot to cook this all in. And I know what you're thinking, gross lima beans, but the finished product of this just makes a buttery, smooth, sweet, creamy ham and beans. And the first thing we're gonna wanna do is boil our ham bone for just about an hour, and mine is frozen. Normally, if it was not frozen, I would pick as much of the meat off as I could and just kind of dice that up, but I'm just gonna try and boil this the way it is right now. We're gonna use just enough water to boil the bone, but we're gonna reuse this water, so you don't wanna get too much water. And doing this is gonna add all of the flavor to the ham and beans. The beans are just gonna soak up all of that flavor, but it does give us one challenge, and that is one of our enemies in the freeze drying world, high fat content. So there's a couple things that we can do. You can let the bone broth cool and skim off some of the fat off of the top before you cook your beans in it. Or what I'm gonna try and do is, while this is boiling, I'm gonna try and remove as much of the fat as I can. You can rinse it off, you can trim the fat off, but it's really kind of a delicate balance, because if you remove too much of that fat, it's going to also remove a lot of your ham and beans flavor that you're used to. While the ham bone's cooking for an hour, you're gonna wanna dice up 1 onion, do about 2 cloves of garlic. I'm using freeze-dried garlic, so it's kind of granulated. Probably no more than 2 cloves. I think that's probably all you need. And then any meat that you trimmed off of the ham bone, you're gonna wanna dice that up. That also gives you a good opportunity to separate some of that unnecessary fat. And then you're gonna need 2 pounds of the large lima beans. All right, I've separated as much of the loose meat away from the bone as I can, and we're gonna process that next. Well, pork is not exactly a lean meat, but we're gonna do the best we can to separate the really obvious fatty stuff. But the problem with doing that is that a lot of the flavor in ham is from that fat. And I've gone ahead and separated the real fatty stuff from the more lean stuff. I'm gonna add those in with my ingredients. And for some reason, I always have an audience when I do this. I'm not sure why. And our ham bone has been boiling for about an hour. I shouldn't say boiling, kind of simmering. And most of the loose stuff on this should come off. However, I would be very careful on what you pick off of this, because we just don't want to add too much fat into there. There should still be plenty of other good bone flavor in here. You can see, you know, all the oils and stuff floating here. That's going to give you a lot of flavor still. Low and slow is the name of the game today, and the entire process is going to take anywhere from 4 to 5 hours to get that right consistency of ham and beans. So I'm going to add 2 pounds large lima beans. I'm going to add my 2 cloves of garlic, my ham that I diced, and then 1 onion. We're going to do just a dash of salt and pepper. And then about once every hour, we're gonna check on this. We're just gonna check the consistency of the beans. And when those are ready, they're pretty much just gonna fall apart. They're gonna turn into a cream or almost like a gravy. And I love this recipe not only because it's really good, but it's a firehouse recipe. And my dad always tells stories about how all the firefighters, even if it was their day off, they'd come in to have beans on that day. And this is a great recipe for those cold, kind of nasty days. It's just real comfortable food. It warms you up and just kind of fills your belly. We are getting awful close on this, and if you look at the consistency, the beans start falling apart. They kind of just all turn into almost a paste or like a cream. Something to remember when you're cooking them, the beans are gonna expand quite a bit, so you wanna make sure that you keep enough water on them, but you don't wanna put too much water. You don't want this to be soupy. You still want it to be pretty thick when it's done. Every time you do this, it's gonna be a little bit different. just because of the beans, because of the amount of water you put in, depending on how long you cook it for, the temperature you cook it for. There's tons of different variables. For me, it looks like about a pound of beans per tray. This is a large size freeze dryer. This is a great opportunity to use our freeze dryer dividers. And I went onto the trays with parchment from freeze drying supplies, as well as we can also use our new lids. And the thing that I like about these lids with the dividers is it pushes the dividers, it keeps pressure on them, keeps them pushed down. So that way, if you're gonna put this into the fridge to store until you freeze dry, or if you're gonna go into the deep freeze, it's gonna keep all of those portions separated while it's freezing. All right, these look like they're good. Let's throw them in the freeze dryer. All right, well, this is the part where I remind you to subscribe if you haven't already. We do freeze drying on this channel, so if you're interested in freeze drying, make sure you subscribe. Click the bell to get notifications. That'll let you know every time we release a video. For us, that's every Sunday at 8 a.m. Make sure you give us a thumbs up. Really helps with the YouTube algorithm. Helps this information get out to people who would be interested in freeze drying if they don't know about freeze drying already. And another one of our good sources is our Facebook group, or our MeWe group. Lots of smart folks on there, lots of like-minded people. And if you have a question on freeze drying that you need answered, you can either post it in the social media group, or you can use that little magnifying glass on each one of those and find an old thread that covers pretty much anything you can think of. And if you've seen any products that you like on this video, including our new lids, check out freezedryingsupplies.com. And if you're considering purchasing a freeze dryer, please consider using our affiliate link. That can be found down in the description. And that just helps us with our giveaways. It helps us develop new products, and it helps out the freeze drying community. And now I'm gonna click continue, and we're gonna do some freeze dried ham and beans. Okay, we're all done. 44 hours, 57 minutes, so almost 45 hours. So now we have some beautifully portioned ham and beans, a whole bunch. I think one serving I would consider probably one section about this big. Ham and beans is really filling, even if it's a small amount, so keep that in mind. So I'm gonna take these, I'm gonna bag them up with the Avid Armor sealer, the vacuum chamber sealer. If you didn't catch the video on this, I'll put a link down in the description for this as well. But I do want to address a couple things that have been coming up, a couple questions that have been coming up a lot. One of the ones that I've seen quite a bit is, can it do a ball jar or a mason jar? So there you go, there's your answer right there. Obviously you cannot do liquids because it has to be on its side in order to seal in the chamber, but you could definitely do dry ingredients. So if you wanted to do ham and beans, for instance, that shouldn't be a problem. I am going to take my vacuum time up just a bit, and so does it seal it? Here's the true test. Seals it very well. So the other thing we need to talk about is whether or not you need an oxygen absorber when you chamber vac seal, and my answer to that is yes. There it is. I love it. I'm gonna bag up the rest of these, and then we're gonna have a little rehydration challenge. I was a little bit worried whether or not this was gonna store long term, because sometimes when you get greasy food, it's oily on your fingers, but this does not seem to be oily. So it seems like it could store for a little bit longer than just 3 years or something. So at first glance, I would probably lump this somewhere in between short term and long term, but we're just not gonna know until that time has passed. Well, here's our final freeze-dried product. I did vacuum seal this in the USB 32. There's a close-up for you. I'm gonna add some boiling water and just kind of stir as we go, and then we're gonna let it sit for probably about 5 minutes, I think. Some of those beans are kind of thick. They might take a little bit to rehydrate, but I can already tell you this is gonna be awesome. The nice thing about stuff like this is you can change the texture. If you don't like it to be real thick and paste-like, you can water it down a little bit more. I'm gonna cover this up, and then we'll check back in about 5 minutes. All right, let's check this out. So this is pretty thick. In fact, it looks like I got a couple of spots of dry still. So I'm gonna add a little bit more water. We'll mix it in. So it definitely soaks up water quick, so you might have to add water a couple of times, but let's give it a taste test, see where we're at with that. All right, here it goes. It's perfect. It's right on. It's exactly the way it was before we freeze dried it. You would never ever know. Meals like this I love because they're so easy to rehydrate. You can do them anywhere and they turn out great. There's no evidence of that it was freeze dried. And if you like ham and beans and something that'll just kind of warm your belly on a cold day, this is the meal for you. And it's great that it freeze dries with no complications. I think it's 100%. And the beauty of this is that we took a ham bone that would most of the time just get thrown away. We added some beans, which are super inexpensive, and we made a meal out of it. In fact, we made a lot of meals out of it. So total win. In the meantime, this is Retired at 40. Remember to live life simple, and we'll catch you next week.